Hello, lovelies. You're listening to episode 10 of the Broken Enchantments podcast, written and read by Elizabeth Wheatley. That's me. I hope you enjoy this episode, and I would love to connect with you on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. You can check out the links below. Now let's get to the story. Arrows whizzed toward the beast and buried themselves in the seemingly impenetrable hide. The monster yelped and staggered sideways. A shout rose from someone hidden in the trees, and another volley ensued. Janir couldn't help feeling sorry for the creature as it cried out and squealed in pain. The beast stumbled and fell to the ground, twitching and whimpering. Arrows bristled from it like quills of a hedgehog. Janir glanced up to see warriors in dark leather armor step from the trees. Their chainmail clinked softly as they advanced upon the two companions. Several of the men marched past the pair of intrepid survivors to check that the beast was finished. "Is it dead?" the leader called, surprisingly young to be commanding men. In response to his question, the monster struggled to raise its head, groaning. Quick as a flash, it wrapped its tongue around one of the soldiers, dragging him toward its gaping maw. Janir looked away, not wanting to watch. She heard shouts and a shrieking wail like that of her rods as the creature was set upon by argotolums. This final act of defiance ended quickly with a particularly loud shriek and then silence. Satisfied that his orders were carried out, the commander turned his steely gaze to Janir and Karile. He was well-tanned and muscled, bearing the signs of long and strenuous hours spent outdoors. It had been 7 years since Janir and the leader had last seen one another, but she still recognized him. There was something about his presence, an indescribable essence, that undeniably declared him. She couldn't understand or explain it. "Oh dear," Karile said woodenly, as if he wanted to say other words but didn't feel they would be appropriate. "Karile, no matter what happens, don't—" "Silence!" The argotolum surveyed them for several seconds, as if he were heeding their fear, the same way one might warm a drink on a cold day. "Where's the key, boy?" It was strange to hear him addressing Karile as boy, when he could hardly be a year or two older. Karile shook his head, pursing his lips nervously. "Key? What key?" "Don't play games with me, enchanter. We know you found where it is." Those few words were equivalent to a vivid description of torture methods to Janir. She knew she was trembling, staring up at the leader slack-jawed. She also knew from what she remembered of him that her reaction was giving him great pleasure. So they had escaped the Mazag and run straight to the awaiting arms of the argotolums. There was irony in that somewhere, but Janir would let someone else laugh at it. "I am sure the tender touch of a carcatan can loosen your tongue," the argotolum said. Karile gulped and didn't reply. Inside, Janir was thinking frantically, hoping in vain that maybe if she thought the words hard enough, Karile would hear them. "Please don't use my name. Please don't use my name." "All right," Karile hesitantly began, his voice shaking like a leaf in a storm. "I have it, and I will help you find the crystal chamber if—" He hesitated for a very long time, while the argotolum commander seemed terribly amused by the whole spectacle. "Just let Janir go, and I'll help you with whatever you want," Karile bravely offered. Angry they had used her name and confessed to having the key, but very much impressed with his bravery, Janir stared at Karile. She felt like she suddenly owed him something, and it made her even more uncomfortable. Contrary to her fervent hopes, the young argotolum did recognize the name. Like a whiplash, his gaze instantly switched from the enchanter to her. "Janir," he repeated. "What a very uncommon name." There was almost a threat in his tone. Janir swallowed hard and looked to the ground. Maybe if she just didn't make eye contact? "My lord Lucan," called one of the argotolums. "Shall I deal with the prisoners?" The warrior held a black rod, just like Janir's, in a loose, casual grip. Lucan raised a hand to decline, irritation creasing his forehead. "What are you doing here, girl?" he sharply demanded. "Oh, she's just a friend," Karile interjected. "She's along for the ride, really. Bit of a liability. Asks lots of stupid questions. More trouble than she's worth. If you ask—" "Silence." Lucan lashed out a kick that clipped Karile in the chin. The enchanter's head snapped back and he whimpered, clutching at his mouth. Karile. Janir reached for him, but Lucan stomped on her hand.
Who are you, girl? You're not an enchantress. There's nothing of magic about you. You've never been spotted before. You've simply appeared since we tracked the enchanter to the mountains.
He twisted his heel on top of her hand, and it was all she could do not to cry out.
But it's him we want. Now be a good girl and answer me honestly, and we might let you go. Who are you?
Janir kept her head down. Karile might know what she was, but he did not know who she was. If Lucan learned who she was, this would be so much worse.
My lord.
One of the Argatolums toed something in the grass. Lucan removed his boot from Janir's hand, abandoning her as if she were a broken toy. He searched where the other Argatolum had indicated, frowning in confusion.
What's this?
He picked up her black rod, wincing. A low, distant drone sounded from the rod, and a faint black bruise formed on his hand. The young Argatolum glared at Janir, the wheels in his mind turning hastily. Striding swiftly to her, he held the rod in front of her face, mere inches away.
Where did you get this?
He demanded. He seized her arm and shook her violently.
Where did you get this?
Janir was terrified. She could risk his wrath or guarantee her death. Perhaps if she pretended to be stupid. She wanted her Carcotton back, for whatever good it would do her. Some innate possessiveness itched inside her mind, aching to reclaim what was hers.
Let me tell you something you may not know about Carcotton, Lucan purred. They are made with several things, one of which is the blood of the Argatolum they are to serve.
Janir kept her head down as she had done for so many years of her childhood. It was like she was reliving every bad memory of Adasha in that moment.
Because of that, with very few exceptions, only the Argatolum they were made for, and their close kin can wield them safely.
He brought the rod just a little closer to her face. Janir wanted to pull away, but was trapped. It was like Lucan saw that she was ignorant of her heritage and meant to flaunt it in her face.
Now, a Carcotton will not harm the one they were made for unless the presiding Argatolum or the first heir is wielding it.
He leaned down, close enough to whisper without his other warriors overhearing. For your sake, you best hope this hurts. He pressed the rod against her cheek. A shriek filled the air, and Lucan let off a yelp, leaping backwards and throwing the Carcotton as far as he could out of reflex. He stumbled, cursing and shaking out his hand, while the other Argatolums pointed their Carcotton at Janir, and one went to help his prince. They asked what was wrong and seemed ready to attack Janir at any second, but he didn't give the order. He didn't speak for a long moment, not even blinking as he nursed his hand and gaped at Janir in disbelief.
It's you, was all Lucan could manage. The Lord Argatolum used your blood to make them.
Used my blood? Her brother quickly recovered himself, or he was excellent at hiding surprise. Not for one more second did he question it. Perhaps he could recognize her as she did him. Perhaps he saw no point in denying what was plain to them both.
Yes. You don't recall him cutting you and soaking something in your blood?
Lucan's ridicule and mockery were as clear as words. Her memories from her time in Adasha were hazy, especially close to the time she left. The Lord Argatolum might have done that for all she knew.
My lord, what do you mean?
Asked the head Argatolum, the one who had offered to deal with them earlier.
Who is the traitor?
Lucan's surprise had wore off, but he still ignored his warrior.
I can use the enchanter to help me find the crystal chamber for our father's client. As for you, he turned a malicious look in Janir's direction. It will be nice to again have a playmate.
He seemed to be accepting this gracefully and without question. She reappeared after 8 years, and he wasn't even batting an eye. Even if he could recognize her, she did him. It made Janir certain that something else must be at work here, something she didn't understand. If anything, Lucan seemed pleased.
My lord, what is this?
The strange Argatolum asked once again.
This?
Lucan motioned to the girl at his feet with disdain.
It would seem that this is Janir Argatolum, my elder sister. Well,
he made an offhand gesture.
If being born 3 hours earlier qualifies as elder.
That was one thing that had always upset Janir. 4 hours younger, 3.5 hours younger. and she would have never been faced with the sibling rivalry that plagued her early years.
Weakling, Lucan spat, and traitor.
With that, he picked her carcatan back up and marched over to Karile.
Now, Enchanter, you have the key. Where do we take it?
Karile sheltered the silver egg protectively under his chest. The Argatalan prince seemed perfectly content to let him hang on to it for now. After all, he could take it away with a flick of his wrist.
Answer me, Enchanter,
Lucan snapped.
My lord, perhaps someone with more experience should...
Stay out of it, Mortong Kamak, Lucan growled, raising Janir's carcatan threateningly. She wondered why he didn't use his own. Did he not have his own? Have the men break camp and hunt for some supper, but leave the two of them with me. At a first glance, Janir thought she must be mistaken, but a second look revealed that Kamak had the pale complexion and sandy hair of a Brevian. In some ways, it was strange to see an Argatalan who had her same coloring, but that was where the similarities ended. Kamak wore a hard expression like a plate of armor, and there was something about the way he moved and spoke that made Janir feel she would not want to cross him. Lucan never once took his attention off Karile. As Kamak repeated the order and the men moved to obey, Lucan crouched before the prone enchanter. Tell me, or this will become very, very painful. Just leave him. A booted foot jabbed into Janir's side before she could finish. The Argatalan standing over her sneered contemptuously as she struggled to breathe. You. Lucan jabbed a carcatan in her direction. I don't know what role you play in this, and I don't care. The enchanter is the one with the knowledge I want, and you will save your words for explaining to the Lord Argatalan. He will want to deal with you himself, and I would not deny him the pleasure. Understood? Without waiting for a response, Lucan returned to Karile. Janir made a weak effort at speaking, but she still couldn't draw breath. Lucan paid her absolutely no heed. It made her feel insignificant like nothing else. Where do we take the key? Lucan punctuated each word with a clear, measured tone. Karile gulped. I don't know. Lucan did not believe him. He jabbed the carcatan into Karile's shoulder. A scream ripped from Karile's mouth, and he thrashed on the ground in agony. It was worse than the cries of the Mazag, worse than any scream Janir had ever heard. Stop! She cried, scrambling for him. Please stop! A heavy foot slammed between her shoulder blades, pinning her to the ground. She tried to shove it off, but it was pointless. Lucan released Karile and fixed him in a cold stare. Now I shall ask again. Where is the crystal chamber? Karile coughed and shivered on the ground, clutching at his shoulder and whimpering. I don't know, he moaned. With a sigh of annoyance, Lucan jabbed the rod against his neck, just below the ear. Where is it? Lucan demanded, over the carcatan's wails and Karile's shrieks. Janir tried to writhe out from under the foot holding her down, but to no avail. You'll kill him, she cried. Stop! Lucan did, but not because she had asked him. This is the last time I shall ask you, Lucan growled. You had best answer me honestly, or I will hand you over to one of my Mortons. He motioned threateningly to the other Argatalan warriors. Where is the crystal chamber? Each word was clear and concise, articulate and calm. I don't know, Karile whimpered. I don't know. Lucan raised the carcatan and Karile shrank back. I don't know, he screamed. I swear I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Once we get there, I could probably piece things together, but... Tears were trickling down Karile's cheeks, and Janir felt a pang of empathy. He was just a boy. He shouldn't have to go through this. For all that he had lied and deceived her, he didn't deserve this. Lucan, please, Janir pleaded. He doesn't know. You have to believe... The boot in her back twisted, and she was forced into silence. Lucan shot her a hard glare at the mention of his name. She had a feeling she was lucky he couldn't use her carcatan on her. He returned to the enchanter at his feet, contemplating Karile's tears and desperate clutching at the egg. Perhaps you don't know, he decided. Karile gave no response. He lay prone and vulnerable on the ground, whimpering. No matter. I know where we can find someone who does. Lucan snapped his chin to the Argatalan standing over them. Bind the prisoners, secure them, and then help set up the camp. He snatched the egg from Karile and marched away without another word.
The Argotolums stiffly inclined their heads before doing as they were told. One grabbed Karile and the other grabbed Janir, and they marched them to a pair of thick saplings near where the campfire was being built. Karile! Janir tried to reach for him, but her wrists were yanked back and lashed around the tree. Karile, are you all right? He shook his head weakly. The key, he mumbled. They have the key. This is not good, Karile surmised. It had taken him a good hour to regain his senses after Lucan's beating. Not good, not good, not good. So very not good. Janir agreed, but she was getting tired of hearing him say it. If you don't stop talking, I will cut out your tongue myself, Lucan threatened, glowering from a log beside the fire. Lucan was a little apart from the others by the flames, eating something that had once been a deer while watching the prisoners bicker. The crescent moon hung high above them, a solemn face twinkling the stars so bright that they silhouetted the towering mountains against their sparkling display. Karile glanced at Lucan, wondering whether or not he would make good on his threat. After staring for a spell, the enchanter must have decided that it was wise not to upset him. With a deep sigh, Janir leaned against the sapling at her back. Lucan was holding the silver egg, tilting it this way and that to reflect the firelight, examining the intricately carved runes with curiosity. He just sat a few paces away, taunting them. The Argotolums had brought their horses to the campsite, and with dismay, Janir saw that they had Kolbo as well. He was tethered with the other steeds and treated the same as one of them. Janir wasn't surprised. He was a well-bred animal. He had a great deal of value, but money couldn't buy what he meant to her. She would have to find a way to take him with her when she escaped. And she was determined that she would. In the distance, a cougar roared after its prey. The distressed bleating from a mountain goat followed the triumphant snarl. The fire crackled contentedly, feasting on dead wood. An owl hooted from somewhere nearby. Beautiful, isn't it, Janir? Lucan murmured, not even glancing in her direction. She wasn't certain if he was referring to the animals or the egg, so she said nothing. All but unlimited power, Lucan absently mused. He held up the key. Imagine what it would be like if we could use this. Janir was very grateful that they couldn't. The other Argotolums kept mostly to themselves, which seemed a bit odd. They did a fair amount of whispering and chattering when Lucan wasn't looking in their direction. She noticed that they usually glanced to their young leader as they gossiped. Janir wasn't sure what to make of that. Lucan took to examining her carcatan. He didn't touch them, just let Janir wonder what he was doing as he studied them cryptically. Janir found that she itched to have them back. They were Argotolum, yes, made by the Lord Argotolum, but Armandius had put them in her saddlebags for a reason. He must have known what they were for, and that they could help her. More importantly, he meant for her to use them. Janir wondered if he had known all those years what was in that mahogany box. Had he assumed she did too? Lucan said in a quieter tone, As your brother, they resent me, but I can still use them if I am willing to endure the pain. He held up the silver chain dangling the crest of Caerson. He'd taken it off her when he'd tied her to the sapling. Janir wasn't sure he recognized it or if he was flaunting that he was now in possession of everything that had been theirs, but he examined it carefully, just as he had the key and her carcatan. After a few moments, he tucked the medallion away, stashing it in an inside pocket of his jerkin. Sleep well, you two, he said, almost scornfully. We have a long trek tomorrow.
This has been the Broken Enchantments podcast. Thank you for listening. Check out my Patreon for early access to episodes, bonus content, and lots of patrons-only freebies. You can learn more at elizabethwheatley.com. And don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.